I'm here in Bolgheri at the Tenuta Dell'Ornellaia estate, and I'm here with Axel Hines, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the soils, the vines, the grapes, everything that really goes into this final production of what produces fabulous wine. So first, Axel, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
I appreciate that. You were telling me earlier that the soils in this area are really very diverse, very different, and sometimes can just change from one plot to the next.
They definitely do. This is something you'll find in many places of Tuscany, and Bolgheri is no exception. To summarize, there are 2 or 3 different types of soils in Bolgheri. There is a lower part, the vineyards that are closest to the seas, rather in the flatland, tend to be dominated by sand. They're quite warm positions, sometimes superficial soils because there is a lot of rock underneath, and usually these are the first vineyards to be picked at Ornellaia, because we do have some vineyards in these positions. The more you go up, most of the vineyards in Bolgheri are on a sort of foothill position at maximum between 60 and 110 meters above sea level. Like this vineyard where we're here, we're around 100 meters sea level. Soils tend to get more clayish, alluvial, quite deep soils, always with a high amount of clay. And in some places, like here, limestone underneath. In some places, just pure clay on several meters deep. And in some places, also a fairly high amount of stones, like here in Bolgheri.
You shared a very interesting story with me earlier about the history of the vine density, and I have to be honest with you and tell you that I have never come across an estate that has such a diversity in density of vine planting, and I'd like you to share that with our readers.
It is definitely true, and I think that Ornellaia in this respect is a quite particular case. It's at the same time a blessing and sometimes a curse, because we probably do have the widest range of planting densities that you will find in an Italian wine estate, starting with vineyards that go from 3,000 vines per hectare to 9,000, and in one case also 12,000 vines per hectare. So here we're in a high density vineyard which is close to 9,000 vines per hectare. It's just because things have been on a fast evolutionary track in Tuscany. People started seriously considering viticulture 30 years ago, in the beginning of the 1980s, but still maintaining the format of ancient plantings, which were all done at low planting density. And then in the 1990s and 2000s, people were slowly starting to develop higher planting densities, and so did Ornellaia. So really, since we've planted from the 1980s onwards until 2005, every period of planting has somewhat had its own series of planting densities. I would say that everything that is beyond 5,000 vines per hectare, better 6,000 vines per hectare, can be considered high density and does a significant improvement in quality. Is
that because the vines are being more stressed in terms of what they have to do to pick up their nutrients and so forth?
Definitely. That's the key element to it. That allows a better control of vigor, and you have an increase in quality.
You can sort of zoom in here on some of these grapes. They look fabulous. They're in great shape, and I know that everybody was dealing with a rather intense heat wave for a bit this year, but being in a Mediterranean climate, not too far from the sea, certainly I'm sure spares this area from the worst and the most intense, and the grapes look wonderful, and it sounds as if your 2011 harvest will go down, or the grapes will go down as being very high quality from what you were saying.
I think we're really in possibly one of the greatest vintages in recent times. We've been quite blessed, I have to say, because we had a strain of really extraordinary vintages in the 2000s, and the last ones, 2006, 2007, 2008, also 2009, were all very high quality vintages. So it seems a little bit difficult always shouting out shouting out for a new great vintage, but I think definitely 2011 has a very high potential, and I think we're into a great vintage 2011. Yes, definitely.
That sounds wonderful.